Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Studio Cinema Saturday, the show where we review films old and new, the ones that you don't like and the ones that you do. I'm your host, Dalton, and today I'm joined by Kale and Garrett. And today we're going to be talking about Christopher Nolan's latest film, Oppenheimer.
It might be my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. I've thought a lot about it since we watched it the other day, and I really loved that movie. It is 3 hours of tense enjoyment.
But all 3 hours were very entertaining. I wasn't bored at any point during the movie, and yes, it is mostly dialogue heavy, but it's all very interesting dialogue. You care about it. You care about what's going to happen to Oppenheimer.
The first thing I think about when it comes to this movie is beautiful. That's a good-looking movie.
Hoyt Van Hoytema.
You've got to see this movie in IMAX if you're going to see it. The best form of a historical movie, telling a nonfiction story. This is a part of not only U.S. history, but world history. And I think this movie is important.
It's also really important for me because I just always really liked Oppenheimer and just surrounding the physics and the science of it. And I think Christopher Nolan nailed the explanations of some of that. It was really cool just to see him take that and try to deliver it to audiences in a way that is palpable.
Tell me who's in this movie.
There are a lot of big names in this movie, and that is part of the reason why it's so good. You have Cillian Murphy, you have Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, RDJ. Can you say his name for me? Played the young Han Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich.
Florence Pugh, Jack Quaid, Rami Malek, Devin Bostic, Josh Peck.
Roderick Rules.
David Dastmalchian, if I'm saying that right. Tom Conti, and Gary Oldman. But anyways, we're going to break into a little bit of a discussion about the film.
So, one of the first couple things that I saw about this movie, people were saying that Christopher Nolan had added in aspects of psych thriller and horror, while the film itself is more of a psych drama. Why are people saying this? Because I'm sitting in this theater going, I can't believe that this is getting this feeling out of me right now.
Okay, so minor spoilers ahead. We are going to delve into a little bit of what you see in the film. One of the biggest, representations of what he's talking about is there are these sequences after the Trinity test. Oppenheimer, so it's like a little press conference, and the American public, they're cheering, it was a successful test. And the audio of their cheering just kind of drowns out. We're in Oppenheimer's head. And he starts to see flashes of light and these people just being burnt to a crisp. And it's a very horrifying thing. Some legit horror tactics are going on. Taking away the sound design, that's big horror right there.
Right. He looks down and steps through the body. But I think my number one moment of oh my gosh, this feels like a horror film is when the Trinity test goes off. You hear nothing but Oppenheimer breathing.
Oh.
I was thrown by this, squirming in my seat. I can't believe that's what I'm hearing while the Trinity test is going off.
I mean, you're just so inside of the character of Oppenheimer that the focus is just not about all that's going on. When that bomb goes off, it is, what is he thinking? What is going on with him? What are some of the people around him, their reactions? But then just him breathing and him thinking.
One of his techniques in the film is these black and white sequences. Christopher Nolan's come out and said what they mean, but I want to get your thoughts. What do you think that they mean?
I feel like metaphorically it means so much because maybe through the eyes of Oppenheimer, and this is kind of goes along with, that the script was written in first person. Through his eyes, everybody is only seeing this in black and white. That's initially the first reaction I had to it. I'm interested to see what you guys think real quick.
Seeing it initially toward the beginning of the film, my thoughts were maybe this is a past and present thing. It is told a little bit out of order. The scenes shift out of black and white. It's you kind of reveal that this is a very people's mindsets. It's so representative of just what some people think versus others, especially in the case of RDJ's character, who you primarily see in the black and white scenes, and just getting his mindset against Oppenheimer's. Yeah, Strauss.
What I saw on the internet is color for most of the film. Those are subjective. The black and white sequences are supposed to be objective.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see, like, most of the black and white sequences are the indictment. There's that, and then there's also segments that you see in black and white initially that are in color by the end of the film.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the Einstein scene is in black and white the first time you see it.
Right.
Yeah, and what I really liked about that is we see it in black and white and we don't know what they're saying. But then later on we see it in color and we do know what they're saying.
There are so many characters in this film that some of them are almost hard to keep up with at times. What did y'all think? Who did you like? Would you like to see more of?
I'll start off with talking about Oppenheimer because I absolutely loved him and I loved how human he was, and I think Christopher Nolan and Cillian Murphy did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and I loved hearing Christopher Nolan talk about how, since the script was written in first person, when he went to talk to Matt Damon about it, he was like, okay, so like, this is kind of a weird script. Like, we're going to be in Cillian's head the whole time, and everybody else is just going to be there to support him. Like, we are going to be so in-depth in Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I think it's a really stylistic and unique way to go about a film that is kind of a character study, you know?
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Especially when adapting it from, like, this book. I bet that translated really well.
It had to have helped the process.
Yeah.
What about other characters? What about
Strauss? Let's talk about Strauss a little bit. Robert Downey Jr.
In this role, he's one of the big dogs.
I mean, sort of one of the film's antagonists.
Yeah, absolutely.
The biggest twist, I thought, in that film was kind of giving his intentions away.
Yeah, no, he was such a dynamic character, not only to the plot, but I mean, in this movie, you're talking about real life.
And he definitely had multiple sides to him. There's the side of him that's coming out during the indictment, and there's like the kind of private scene after that, the little black and white sequence.
Yeah, but then you go to the beginning of the film, and he's coming to him about offering them the role, and
right. So he's a very two-faced character.
Right.
He has his own agenda. Everybody in this film has their own agenda.
Exactly. Seeing him early on trying to get Oppenheimer, like, oh, you should come take this job. Like, just trying to put him in his pocket, which is a very, like, you know.
Absolutely. That's how the game works.
Yeah.
You know, that's how people are brought in. So I would say one of my favorite characters in the film, though, was Matt Damon's character, Wesley Groves.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was so fun to watch, you know, like his dynamic with every character was fun.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he didn't get along with anybody.
No.
But, like, people liked him, you know? Like, he was the kind of the person around that you respected almost.
He was. Which, initially, he comes in and you're like, oh, who's this guy? Like, some government dude. He was the guy that was in charge of the startup of the Pentagon, I think they mentioned.
The casual line drop in the movie. They don't say much more about it, but
two big things about his character was in the scenes that there's barely any humor in this movie at all. It is such a serious film, but he was the biggest breakaway from any of the tension. But it felt so natural. Like, I thought Matt Damon did a really good job of that in the film. I think my favorite part of his character was his relationship with Oppenheimer.
I mean, they're constantly going at it throughout the whole film, from like, hey, you can't know this, to hey, they can't know this. Like, there's a bunch of...
Hey, you better not be telling anybody this.
Right.
They're two characters that have such differing views about what's going on. And I think back, the scene that really floored me was after the Trinity test. Oppenheimer goes up to him and he's like, hey, keep me in the loop. The next shot you see is the truck shutting away the bombs, and that just feels
visual metaphor.
This feels like no one is speaking to us. Like,
and then the scene after that is Oppenheimer. He turns on the radio and he hears about Hiroshima. So it's like, I'm like, oh wow, like okay, we're moving. I kind of have mixed feelings about him. Like, I like him to a certain degree, but it's also like, I don't know. He's kind of operating within what he can, because I mean, he works for the U.S. government, so like he's doing what he can do.
Yeah, and especially during his scene during the indictment, where at the end they're like, "Would you today renew his license?" And he was like, "Honestly, no, but
under the circumstances,
I wouldn't renew anybody's license."
He's like, like none of them are fit. Like, what clears someone for this?
Right. Who is the guy to build the atomic bomb?
So piggybacking off of the atomic bomb, we're going to talk a little bit about the practical effects in this film, considering there is no CGI.
Something that I didn't even think about going into the movie, which Garrett pointed out to me the day after, is this is not the first atomic bomb we've seen in a Nolan film. They dropped one in The Dark Knight Rises.
You're right.
You get that mushroom cloud out in the distance, and it was really interesting to hear Christopher Nolan talk about it in the interview I watched. He's like, yeah, well, I wanted that bomb to kind of feel safe because he just saved Gotham. That is not how this atomic bomb felt. This is...
I mean, the entire wall of IMAX screen is filled with just fire. At certain parts of the bomb going off. That was so cool.
Oh, yeah. Silence and explosion and the fire. I mean, it lasted a good bit, too. It wasn't just like a bomb went off.
It was not a short scene.
No, this ain't a...
The film, like I said, whenever we first watch it, the film breathes for a minute. This is a whole sequence. We're cutting to everybody who's reacting to the Trinity test.
Breathes.
They've been kind of secretive about how they actually made the bomb. Like, I've been trying to look into it to find exactly how they did it.
He's trying to figure out how to make it.
But I think it's just weird that they're kind of, like, I think they blew some stuff up. Not only for the big explosion, which they did some of the smaller, like, test explosions as actual test explosions. But then during the beginning of the film, you've also got this visual images of like photons and of like small explosions or like a sun like crushing.
It almost feels like you're inside of Oppenheimer's brain.
Yes. Really interesting how they made that effect because they said they took just magnesium black powder just to make little sparks and then they'd throw ping pong balls at it.
That's cool.
And like just little things at it until it got the right look they wanted.
Piggybacking off of visual metaphors. Do you guys remember what the first shot of the film is? What's the very first shot of the film?
Enlighten us.
Raindrops falling into a puddle.
Yeah.
But do you have any idea what that might represent?
I mean, right off the bat, my mind thinks it's similar to a bomb drop, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's what was intended.
Yeah,
like a bomb dropping.
that's
and like,
awesome. I didn't even think about that.
Not only that, you have all of like the cloud shots where the bombs are going up in the air. Like this film is heavily foreshadowing the Cold War. History aside, you know where it's going. They're telling you the entire time.
Yeah.
So, I want to move past the bomb. So, you know, the scene where he injects cyanide into his professor's apple. Mm-hmm. The book, American Prometheus, kind of disproves that scene. Essentially, the movie version's just exaggerated a little bit. It was a very, very lesser poison. He did not put cyanide in the apple.
That's good.
It was only intended to make the guy feel bad, and he was going to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's one of those things that got ramped up to make him even like more morally ambiguous.
Yes.
Like it's one of the things they put like early in the film to like, okay, like, I don't know, something's a little off with this guy.
Right.
His sense of morality skewed.
Yeah, there's a lot that could represent. It is a really good start to questioning morality in the film. It's like, okay, this dude, he's learning, he's your main character. Like, so far he seems like this guy who just is on this pursuit of knowledge. And then he has a bad day in class, and so he poisons his professor. And I think that really leads in well to the end of the film, where you're questioning a lot of characters' morals. In some ways, it's also a representation of, like, quantum physics. And I'm sure this is a big one people have heard of, is like Schrodinger's cat. It's like, well, he could have eaten the apple, but that didn't mean that he would eat the apple.
Enlighten us on Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, so it's like, if there's a box and there is a cat inside, there is an equal amount of chance that that cat is alive or dead. But you won't know until you open that box. So setting that apple down, and then they go away for the day. Like, that apple set the entire next day, as you saw through the film. He poisoned that apple, and then it was completely up to fate if he was going to eat that apple or not.
And another fun thing that I noticed is the professor that was going to eat the apple is the one that he attended the lecture for, like someone he admired, someone he respected a lot. And he was going to be the one suffering. And I think that kind of goes back to, there's a line in the film, I don't remember who says it, but it's about, with this bomb, you kill the just and the unjust. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that metaphor represents, because, like, that's what happened with the bombs, you know. These were civilians. So one thing you might have noticed, if you've watched Oppenheimer, is there's a lot of communism present. There's a communism scare. And there are a lot of the characters in the film that are communist or have some ties to the Communist Party, and maybe have some ideals that, while they might not, you know, fully agree with everything the Communist Party says, you know, they have some differing ideals from America at the time.
People were terrified.
Yeah.
And I mean, so much so that, like, the black and white sections of the film and the whole, like, security judgment is because they're afraid that somebody was connected to communism and they found out information about the A-bomb. Like, let's talk about the affair.
Gene Tatlock, Florence Pugh.
Yeah, is the known communist, right? That's just his immediate connection to like, oh, Oppenheimer associated with a known communist, and he has to tell him about the affair and, tell him that he wasn't involved in communism.
And during the indictment, you have this sort of like fantasy moment. It's Emily Blunt. She's seeing the affair happen. Like, that's what's happening in her mind. That's where it goes to. And I'm like, that was awesome.
That was one of the toughest scenes in the film to just eyeball.
And I'm sure it was a tough scene to film. Like, we were talking about, like, that. It's a whole room full of, suits and hats, and you're naked and, doing things.
And I really liked, throughout the film, Oppenheimer just is such a free thinker. It was really interesting to see him go from, I don't really think I want to be a part of the Communist Party, to meeting his second wife, Emily Blunt's character. I mean, I just love their story. Like, his interpersonal relationships, I thought were just as interesting as all of, like, the war effort going on.
Absolutely.
Oppenheimer seems a little bit like a people pleaser at times. Like, after the Trinity test, like, he's speaking to the American public in that little press conference, and like, he's very pro-America. I can't remember the exact dialogue, but it was like something like, I bet that showed the Japanese. Like, there was something along those lines. Like, he very much shifts depending on who he's with.
Yeah.
And it could be a safety thing to some degree, like we were talking about, but also, like, I don't know, it's a little bit part of his character. He's unsure. He's not very sure of himself. He has guilt.
Yeah.
He's very guilt-stricken.
He is a very guilty man, and it makes for an awesome character to watch,
And they tie in, not only are the interpersonal relationships tied in through the indictment, but you see these cutaways. Whenever he's feeling guilty about the bomb, he's also feeling guilty about Gene Tatlock. And he feels, through these visual images, he feels responsible for her death. Those are kind of tied together. He still feels responsible for death as a whole. Her death, the people in Hiroshima, the people in Nagasaki, and the people who died from the after effects of the bomb.
Yeah,
like 220-something thousand people. Like,
for our final section of these reviews, we are going to find the Studio 24 score for the film. And I'm going to give this film a 9.
I'm still riding with the IMDb score of 8.8, but that could change whenever I see it again here in about 2 weeks. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sitting right at a 9.4.
That means Studio 24 ranked this film a 9.06. If we do like a tier list of the films we reviewed, I'm putting Oppenheimer in the S.
That being said, we do have a couple of Studio 24 things to talk about before we end off our first movie review.
Our latest film, Heavyweight, just dropped on the channel. Go give it a watch. Give us some feedback in the comment section. And the last of it that you'll be seeing is on Wednesday. This video should be seeing you on Saturday, and so Wednesday, the behind-the-scenes doc for Heavyweight will be coming out. You'll get to take a look inside of Studio 24, and you'll get to see how we operate and what we're doing and how much fun we're having. And I think that'll be a fun video to put on the channel. I can't wait for the studio audience to see inside the studio.
And so that concludes our first Studio Cinema Saturday. I hope you all enjoyed, and until next time, keep watching.
Leave a comment below at what we should review next. Give us suggestions.
Let us know.